Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Vantage Points. I am Hisham al-Maligi with my co-host for this series, Davi Barker. Assalamu alaikum, Davi.
Walaikum salam.
How are you? Looking sharp tonight.
Yeah, the studio is coming together. I bought one of your curtains.
Nice. It's your design, so you get it for free.
Yeah, but yeah,
That's
new
all.
camera, and it's coming together.
Excellent.
New earbud.
Yeah, beautiful. So tonight is the night of the election, and we have a treat for you. Well, this entire week has been treats nonstop, nothing to do with Halloween, but tonight we have comedian Amer Zahr. Everybody knows that he's hilarious, but very few know that he's actually a lawyer and adjunct professor of law. He's going to join us live from the middle of action in the capital of the swing states, Michigan, tonight in a few minutes, inshallah. So hang in there and prepare your questions. If you put a comment or question on YouTube or on Facebook, we can show it right here on the screen and answer it right away. It's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging. And it's going to be a little bit surprising with the atmosphere. So hang in there.
All
So
right,
Davi,
questions for a lawyer comedian. That's a very narrow Venn diagram.
right. No, I mean it's he knows his stuff, and he recently posted a hilarious video about based on his study and teaching of Islamic law. It is
Okay.
permissible in cases of famine to eat pork, right?
Sure,
So-
desert island or something.
Right, and I mean the example that we remember, all of us, is the siege of Sarajevo in the early 2000s when the Serb militias surrounded the city for a few months, and there was famine and no food. So people had to eat as little as what keeps them alive, pork, dog meat, this and that, in order to remain alive. And then once the siege lifted, no more. It's they stopped. So anyway, so based on this Islamic theology ruling, he said that it's permissible to vote for the ham sandwich this time around and just stop right after the election. And the ham sandwich basically is Biden. My theology adds a condition to this above the other conditions, which is only in swing states, because those are the states where the famine is.
Right, that's a good point. I watched your video. I thought it was good on the efficacy of voting in swing states.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Like this is directed to Muslims, of course. If you're a Muslim voter, haven't voted yet, not voting in a swing state like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, if you're voting in New York, which is a guaranteed Trump win, Biden win, it's a blue state, just like California. There's no point of wasting your vote on either Biden or Trump. Neither of them are good for us. But you can help boost the numbers of other candidates. And
Sure.
there are so many other benefits associated with that, ballot access and whatnot. So anyway.
Well, your bit about voting third party I thought was really sound too. If you're in a safe state and it's not going to hurt the outcome you want, to not vote for your primary first party, big party candidate, then give the vote to the third party. Because even if the third parties can even get their 6%, then they satisfy a bunch of ballot access laws. They become more viable alternatives. Which, like, I would honestly like to see a system where there were many more than two parties that were viable.
Right. And basically, if you use the example of New York, where I am, it used to be that for a party to become viable and have ballot access meaning you don't have to collect an unbelievable number of signatures, which is very hard. Most candidates don't make it to the ballot just because of those signatures. So that's a big hurdle. So it used to be, to become a viable official party, you need 50,000 votes for the governor's candidate, So For 48 years, the Libertarian Party was not a viable official party until 2018, when Larry Sharpe received about 90,000 votes. What did Como do? Now it's 180,000 votes, and
Oh yeah,
it's
they change it.
Yeah, and every
Because
2
if there's
years.
one thing both parties can agree on, it's that third party shouldn't be allowed to compete.
Yeah. There are 5 candidates for president this year. It's not just the 2. So there's Howie Hawkins, the founder of the Green Party, from Syracuse, New York, as a matter of fact, running again for president. Jo Jorgensen, Libertarian Party. She's a professor of psychology. And I forgot the 5th, but anyway, there are more than 2 for sure.
Sure.
So, yeah. So how's the situation in Georgia after the remnants of the hurricane?
Oh, well, power is back on, so that's good. It seems like most of the roadways that I can drive to the grocery store without driving 6 blocks out of my way. So
Awesome.
That's good. I cannot walk to the mosque, but that's okay.
Right.
I tried to walk to the mosque because it's a long walk, but it's good exercise, right? And so like I'm like maybe 2.5 blocks away, and it's like literally 3 lanes of traffic are blocked by a giant tree, and there's just no way to get around.
Right.
But
So did it affect the voting process?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure that it must have for somebody. I'm honestly more than access to the actual polling locations. I think it probably had more of an effect because so many people in Georgia did not have access to the news at a time when the campaigns are ratcheted the tightest they ever get. Like all the rallies every day, all the speeches every day, all the news every day. That I'm out of the loop. You know.
Right. No, it happened here also in the Northeast back in the summer with one of the remnants of the hurricanes. It knocked power for like 2 million people for days.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Yeah. So we're about to go live to Michigan to bring Amer in. He should be in a minute or so. But if you have questions for Amer or for us or about anything, just post them on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll go through them as the show goes. Tomorrow, election night, we will be live from 8 p.m. until I fall asleep or California closes about 12 midnight Eastern. So join us. This will be an open mic night. We will have some guests, yes, but we want to hear from you. You can come on in studio, just be here with us like that, or you can post a question or a comment on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll read it on air. So anyway, so we're waiting for Amer. Now, I heard today that a group of Trump supporters riding different types of vehicles and carrying the flags of Trump and this and that surrounded the bus that Biden was on.
Yeah.
The campaign bus.
Like Mad Max or something.
It seemed like that, the picture that I saw, yeah.
Yeah, it's straight up intimidation tactics,
Right.
Like it seems like that should count as voter suppression, and it should be some sort of a felony to literally get a campaign event canceled within a few days of an election.
Right. No, I mean, I don't think it's that, no matter how you feel about the other candidate, they're still a candidate unless you lose the in your sight. The other is not a human to you anymore. Then it makes sense what you're doing.
It's also regardless of the election, it's a straight up First Amendment issue. Yeah. Any person should be able to organize an event to peaceably assemble and should be free from intimidation by opposing groups.
Hold on. I'm receiving word from Michigan that our correspondent, Amer Zahr, is on the line. Hold on.
All right.
Amer.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alaikum assalam. Good.
So
can you guys hear me good?
Yes, we
sure
can hear
can.
you very well.
Okay, great.
So, how's it going there in the middle of action?
Wonderful. Well, I'm in Dearborn, Michigan. I'm at a hookah cafe, just hanging out here, and things are starting to get, a little active around here. The last couple days has been lots and lots of get out the vote stuff here, so we've been working hard, and it's very important that we get all our people out to vote. So that's what I'm trying to do here in the Arab American capital, the Arab Disneyland, baby. We are here in the Arab Disneyland.
That's awesome. And I said before you came in, it's the capital of the swing state of all swing states.
That's right.
Because Michigan basically could flip either way, and the Arab and Muslim vote will play a big part in that.
Yeah, I mean, we have one of, as a lot of people know, one of the largest Arab American communities in the country. Arab Americans, we don't really know because they still call us white on the census, so we never got a good count. But we think that we're about, up to 5 or 6 million in the country. In Michigan alone, could be up to 8 to 10% of that whole total. We think there could be up to 500,000 Arabs in Michigan.
Wow.
And we're more politically active. They're diverse. We have Iraqis, Palestinians, Lebanese, Yemenis, Syrians. We have I just had some hummus. Syrians and Muslim, Christian, of all different kinds of backgrounds. So I mean, it is going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out. But I'll tell you this: in the primaries in Dearborn, when people were really energized, we saw a 50% uptick from the 2016 primaries to the 2020 primaries. And we saw people overwhelmingly vote for one candidate, and that candidate was Bernie Sanders. I'm not seeing that same sort of level of enthusiasm for this Democratic candidate, even though it seems most people are going to be voting for Joe Biden. But there's still a certain amount of Arabs voting for Donald Trump too, so it's going to be very interesting.
Yes, I heard that mostly business people and professional, like doctors, engineers, and whatnot, who have like business to run, they prefer the economic approach of Trump.
There is a lot of that, and there is a lot of that, but people are still, look, for the most part, you have people who have been horrified by the policies of Trump and horrified by his, outright racism, his outright Islamophobia, his outright anti-Arabness, and people are going to be voting on that mostly. But I do think there's going to be a larger amount of pro-Trump Arab voters in 2020 than there was in 2016, that's for sure.
Right.
In your observation, do Arab Christians respond the same way that Arab Muslims do? Like, is there an ethnic solidarity there when it comes to responding to his racism, or even how they think about the subject?
Yeah, for the most part there is, especially on the big, big issues that a lot of people agree on, like Palestine and other issues that had the horror out of a lot of his policies there. But there are also some fault lines, especially with, and not, again, not all, Arabs are not a monolith, and Arab Christians are not a monolith. I mean, we have a huge Arab Christian community here. The Chaldean Iraqi Catholic community tends to be pretty much pro-Trump. The Palestinian Greek Orthodox community tends to be a little bit more pro-Biden. So, it breaks down on different lines. So it's really, really an interesting sort of analysis to see how it all falls out. But even among Arab Christians, they don't all sort of agree where they're going to vote. And among Arab Muslims, they don't all agree where they're going to vote. But we do see a lot of variety.
So I'm very intrigued by the Iraqi Catholic community. Why is that? Why are they supporting Trump?
Well, in 2016, we saw a lot of that support, and they based it on conservative social values, which who knows if Trump really believes in, but I mean, that's what he's saying he does. And but there is also, unfortunately, a strand of Islamophobia in that community, and I think that has also lent itself to supporting Donald Trump a little bit more. This time around, they're doing it again, even though the Iraqi Chaldean Christian community was one of the first communities that Trump went after, suffered the most from his deportation orders. I mean, he was deporting people who came here as kids and then never got their papers in order, and a lot of them were Iraqi Christians. So, it just is interesting and funny, but yeah, that seems like that, they say it comes from the social conservatism.
Right.
Yeah, that hadn't occurred to me either. We talk about a Muslim ban, but I suppose they're all countries with religious diversity, so the Muslim ban could affect Christians just as much if they're from those countries.
Of course. I mean, what you had was Iraqi. We have a huge Iraqi Christian community here, and they were, many of them, rounded up as a result of that first travel ban. And actually, they were in federal custody for a long time because Iraq wouldn't take them because they weren't Iraqi citizens either. They were all American. They weren't American citizens yet, but they were all American. They've been here almost all their lives. And actually, that's
The
how
refugees,
Iraq.
Yeah, they're not foreign nationals. They're
and
expats.
right, and that's actually how Iraq got off the ban list. Was they struck a deal with the Trump administration to accept these deportees. That's how they got off the ban list.
Wow.
So
Okay.
there's a lot of different kinds of politics there.
Very nice. So I watched your latest video from a few days ago, touting your education and teaching of Islamic
Yes.
law.
That's correct.
First of all, I want to know that you're a real mufti or a fake mufti. So tell me about that first. Tell me about your background, baby. You're not going to take me for granted.
I'm an academic mufti. Let me put it like that. I have studied, I studied and specialized in Islamic law in law school. In my I took a dual master's degree with Middle East and Islamic studies and my law degree, dual master's law degree. So I did research and deal with this stuff, and then I taught as a teaching assistant and as a instructor the history of Islam and a lot of stuff about Islamic law. I've lectured a lot about on topics surrounding Islamic law. So academically, I have the chops to talk about it. Now, in my everyday personal life, I'm not the most religious guy, but academically and historically, I definitely have all the chops to talk about it. So a real mufti or a fake mufti? I'll call myself an ivory tower mufti.
Well, I think I figured it out. You're a Western mufti implant.
I could be undercover Islamist. You never know. I wouldn't tell you. Yeah.
Right. So based on your study, you came out with an academic fatwa. Let's put it this way.
That's right. Social, yeah.
It's not a religious fatwa. It's an academic fatwa. That it's okay to vote for the ham sandwich this time around.
Yeah, so there's a few verses in the Quran, and you don't even have to go outside of the Quran for this. There's a few verses in the Quran that tell you not to eat pork. One of the verses says basically that you shouldn't eat pork, but if you're under duress, dire necessity, and without excess and without pleasure, you may. So basically, if you are in a case of extreme hunger, okay, and you have if we're going to talk about it legally, okay, there's 4 conditions that have to be met. Number 1, there needs to be a case of extreme hunger. Number 2, you must have no other choices. Number 3, you must not do it in excess. And number 4, you must not enjoy it. That's actually one of the conditions.
Dude,
So
you're convincing me you're real.
So you can vote not enthusiastically and only
I am a lawyer. So basically, now, so we say to ourselves, what is the extreme? Is there a case of extreme hunger? Yes, we can say Donald Trump is the case of extreme hunger. Are there no other choices? One can say yes, there's no other choices because either Biden or Trump is going to be president. Number 3, not in excess. Yeah, that means you just go, you vote because you have to, but maybe you don't organize, maybe you're not too excited about it, but whatever. And then number 4 is you can't enjoy it. And very important part of this legal analysis is, so that means, for instance, that would mean if you're stuck in the middle of the desert and you're very hungry, if your only choice to survive is pork, you can eat pork. If your only choices to survive are pork and a cupcake, you have to eat the cupcake. You can't eat the pork. So, but in this case, we only have one other choice. And also, very importantly, from a legal point of view, is that once that situation of extreme hunger is gone, then the prohibition comes fully back into effect. So that means Biden if he
Can't vote
wins,
for Biden in December.
well, it just means if Biden wins, you have to understand that he's still ham, and you still have to deal with him very, very cautiously, and maybe even there might even be a prohibition on him, which means in political terms, he's not the answer, right? We still have to fight. We still have to fight for our progressive values. We still have to fight on foreign policy things, but the situation is so bad right now that it warrants voting for this guy, who is a ham sandwich.
That's such a roundabout lesson, but it's something that I wish that people internalized in multiple election years. I think that most people, when they vote for a candidate and the candidate gets in, they have this sigh of relief, and then they let off the pressure. And I think that really, if you want to you have to keep a candidate accountable by keeping the pressure on them, even if they're your candidate, throughout their entire administration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and we should take lessons from. I'm a historian by trade in my undergraduate studies, and we should take lessons from history. I mean, I'm old enough to remember I was 15 when America elected Bill Clinton, and everybody thought they were getting a progressive new generation type president, and he ended up being basically a moderate centrist corporate president. When we elected Barack Obama in 2008, we thought we were changing the world, getting a really progressive candidate, and he ended up being a sort of moderate centrist corporate president. Dr. Cornel West said it the best. He said with Barack Obama, we thought we were getting John Coltrane and we got Kenny G. And so this is now Biden is not even pretending that he's a progressive. Biden is telling us that he's a moderate centrist. He's campaigning that way. And as a progressive, my biggest fear is that if he wins, and again, I'm voting for him, I want to get Trump out. But I understand the sacrifices that are being made. And my biggest fear is that if he wins, there's going to be a narrative in the Democratic Party that centrist, moderate campaigning is how you win elections. And I don't think that's true. I think it's true in this particular circumstance because we have extreme hunger. But I don't think it's true in general. And if that narrative, though, ends up being the overarching narrative, that look what Biden did and what kind of candidate he is, that's how you win presidencies, I think we would lose to the next moderate Republican candidate. That's number one. And it'll be a big blow to the progressive movement, because how are you going to get anything out of a president who basically feels like he doesn't owe your ideology anything? He feels like he won based on, the endorsements of Colin Powell and John Kasich and Cindy McCain. People are talking, he might nominate Bernie Sanders to be labor secretary. He's not going to do that. That's not who he is. People say he might nominate Elizabeth Warren to be treasury secretary. Elizabeth Warren is hated by Wall Street, and Biden is loved by Wall Street. He's not going to put them. He's much more likely to nominate Republicans because that's his whole shtick. He reaches across the aisle, bipartisanship, all this kind of stuff. So I think we just have to be aware that the prohibition on ham comes back into effect. He's still not the solution. We might have to fight against him as much as we've been fighting against Trump. It just might be like a different kind of fight. It might look a little bit different. But if you are a progressive who's interested in a just foreign policy in the Arab world, who's interested in Medicare for all, who's interested in real change on policy when it comes to climate change, Biden's not the answer, and we might find ourselves in really crazy fights when it comes to him.
So, Amer, I want to talk about what does it mean to be a progressive, but first, I want to push back on the fatwa a little bit.
Okay.
I want to add a condition, basically.
Okay.
You're getting light, right? Or whatever fire you call it, coal.
No, it was something else, but no. But go ahead.
You're distracting me, man.
Yes, sir.
So, I want to add a condition to the fatwa of voting for the ham sandwich only in swing states for Arab and Muslim voters, because we don't have the numbers in non-swing states to tip the balance either way.
Well, one can argue that in the non-swing states, like California, for instance, there is no there's no hunger. There's no extreme hunger.
Exactly.
The first condition is not met.
Right.
So yes, you can definitely add that caveat in, of course.
Right. So I agree with you. Then in Michigan, in Florida, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, the swing states basically. But I also would add another layer that pre-istikhara before you actually vote for the ham sandwich.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so tell me, and Davi, I want you to maybe manage this portion because you're more versed in it than me. But basically, Amer, I want you to talk about what does it mean to be a progressive.
Well, to me, it means that to really make it easy and steal a line from the Bernie Sanders campaign, it really means not me, us, right? It means seeing the society in a collective way, understanding that all of our policies should look out for the weakest among us, not the strongest among us. And when we do that, we'll end up helping everybody. And it means it just also means what the word means, progressive, constantly looking to change in order to improve the greater good. Conservative means the opposite, constantly doing nothing, basically conserve, right?
Keeping things the way they were.
That's right.
Getting back to the way they were before.
Yeah, make America great again. So
it's interesting
to me, that's what it means.
So I wouldn't identify as a progressive, not really. I'm a libertarian. Maybe something of like a horseshoe libertarian in the sense that I think when you get outside the Overton window far enough, the left and the right sort of overlap quite a bit. And so it's like interesting that like, as far as what's available in the political spectrum right now, the progressives are the most interesting to me, and they're the ones with whom I would feel the safest in control. Yeah. But I would articulate my philosophy entirely the opposite. Like, I'm an individualist, and I would believe that policies that benefit and empower the individual would cause the most collective good. And so it's interesting to me that, like, with opposite approaches, you could land in the same place, if that makes sense.
Let me ask you this. So when you say you're an individualist, does that mean you're sort of a strict free market person? So in other words, do you think that it's a good idea to have a federally mandated $15 minimum wage? Okay, before you answer,
I don't. I think there's a lot of problems below the minimum wage. But that's not a policy that scares me. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to go out and rally against the minimum wage because I recognize that the cause of inflation has already eroded that so dramatically that that's below what it was when it passed in the first place.
Let me ask you this: if you knew, and we kind of know, that our fellow Americans that stand behind the register or serve the fries at a McDonald's are making $10 or $11 an hour, which comes to $400 a week if they're working full time before taxes. I mean, it's really a poverty wage. You really can't support a family and live on that. If you knew that instead of paying $6 for your meal at McDonald's, that you could pay $6.25 for your meal at McDonald's, but that would mean that your fellow Americans behind the counter would now be making $15 an hour, which could substantially be much less of a burden on their lives. Would you do it?
Given that choice, I would pay the extra. Absolutely. Like I want workers to make a living wage. I want workers to have a successful life and everything. I hate the policies of corporations and the dehumanization that happens in this sort of late stage capitalism is gross to me. It's like mandate is the word I trip on, not minimum wage. You know what I mean? And so
Well, you sound like a progressive to me. I mean, would you?
Yeah, this is my point.
Yeah, I mean, see, a lot of people think individualism is sort of the opposite of progressivism. It's not. I mean, you can be a progressive individualist if you want to be. You can be a progressive that still believes in sort of the individual American dream. I think we all can be, right? But the problem is the way the system is set up is that the American dream is not accessible to everybody, and there's so many hindrances, so would you be willing for us to spend a little less on our military budget so that we could cancel student debt? Would you be willing to have us pay a little bit more in taxes and no premiums to our insurance companies so that we could all have Medicare for all? And in fact, overall, you'd end up spending less anyway. These kinds of things. But, people always throw the labels of like socialism and communism on them, which they don't really even know what these things mean. Socialism means the government owning the means of production. Even Bernie Sanders, in his most socialist movements, has never, ever talked about the government owning the means of production.
as far as like literally running the factories, no, not in any sense. Like whatever people call socialism in America now is just moving money around, which is what the government has always been and always done. It's not like literally owning the means of production. So
except for the government has traditionally been moving money around from poor people to rich people. And and what we're saying is maybe it should work in the other other direction.
So it's like I have the same goals as you. I just am so skeptical of a government solution to it. So yes, I would absolutely be in favor of reducing the military budget of America dramatically. And if that meant compromising and allowing people to take that money and spread it around to a bunch of social programs I'm not necessarily confident in, I would take that compromise.
I think it's about looking at it like this. I believe in free market and private markets for almost everything. Okay? Mm-hmm. If you have a small town or if you have a big country, whoever makes the best hamburger, that should be a free market thing. Okay? You go, you make a good hamburger, you sell it for a price, people pay for it. That should be a free market thing. Healthcare should not be a free market thing. We see that it doesn't work, especially when the healthcare companies' profit is predicated on them not giving you care. It's not predicated on them giving you care. It's predicated on them. So we have to decide what our priorities are. So for instance, we view the military, nobody ever says, oh my God, the military loses so much money, you should never use it, how are you going to pay for it? Because people view the military as a necessity, as even a right for people to have their government protect them militarily. So no one ever asks questions about the military because that's how we view it. So we have to view healthcare the same way. We have to view college education the same way because we have a game show in this country called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader that nobody wins. And that's a problem. That's a problem. I was watching the weakest link the other day, and these are people who have passed the test to get on the weakest link, and they're just missing easy. So one of the questions the other day was the saying goes A-E-I-O-U and sometimes blank, and the person said you. They didn't say why. They said you. So I mean, we have a problem. There's a reason that when we lost the manufacturing jobs in this country, which are never coming back, by the way, when we lost the manufacturing jobs, there's a reason that hit people so hard. It wasn't only because those manufacturing jobs were lost. It's because those manufacturing jobs were jobs that people got out of high school and stayed in them for a long time, and they made a good living. But once they were gone, those people didn't have the background, education, or skills to get other jobs. And what happened was other industries in Michigan, for instance, came in and filled the void. So you had high-tech industries started coming into Michigan when the manufacturing jobs left. But guess what Michigan governor had to do? The Michigan governor had to apply for 50,000 H-1B visas to get workers from China and India who had STEM degrees because there weren't enough workers in Michigan with the requisite skills to take those jobs. So the jobs exist, the skills don't. And the skills don't because a lot of people don't go to college because they can't afford it. And that's a national problem that the government should solve.
So I'm on the issue of the healthcare and how the profit is predicated on how much less they can spend on you, the corporations and the pharmaceuticals and whatnot. That is a construct of the government putting hurdles in front of open and free society to do trade freely, but the regulations in place, and including Obamacare. Let's take Obamacare for example. What did Obamacare do? It took the old system, the same monopolies that were in place, and gave it 100 million more customers.
Right.
Yes, it gave a few perks like if you had the previous disease, what is it called? I forgot.
Pre-existing condition.
Pre-existing condition, yes. So we got a few perks, but they got 100 million more customers and basically stayed in control and monopoly, and it's crumbling still. So it's either you go the Canadian-British system or you go the opposite side, free market. And I have seen so many doctors in my past few years that they stopped taking insurance altogether. They went to cash business. So I'm not sure that the solution by giving the government more to organize that system even more is the solution. This is where we're coming from. We agree on the problem: the monopoly, the corruption, the profit is the motive rather than the service and the healing component of healthcare. So this is where we see things a little different. We don't want to give government more of the same. That's the whole thing.
Well, again,
I also have to kind of just plead ignorance on this to some extent. Like, the medical industry is such a complex behemoth that I don't understand why the insurance premiums are the way that we were, or why the prices are the way that they are. Like, it almost seems like you could unravel a lot of these hurdles to loosen up the Gordian knot of the whole thing before you just took over the whole thing.
Well, that's actually the argument for Medicare for all, right? What is Medicare for? What is Medicare? Medicare is basically a health plan. It's an HMO, okay? Mm-hmm. And just like there are hundreds, if not thousands, of HMOs out there, what Medicare for all is saying: look, let's eliminate all that. Let's make one HMO. That means every doctor takes the same health plan. That means doctors don't spend hours finding codes for things and billing things for 20 different, every doctor's office has a couple people that are just dedicated to billing,
Yeah.
And they spend thousands on software for that. But, if you have one system, it takes away a lot of that administrative cost. So it ends up being much more streamlined, actually.
Like, Homeland Security is way more streamlined than having a whole bunch of different intelligence agencies. I'm with you, okay? But I want to go a step back, because as soon as you say you make one system, I'm like, oh man, if that system becomes corrupt, then there's no alternative. And so the question is, why? How did we get in this mess where doctors' offices have to have an entire person devoted to bureaucracy? Why is it that we've built a medical system where we have all these bizarre insurance codes that don't agree with one another, and people are inside and outside of network? That seems like a problem that came about somehow. It's not intuitive. It doesn't seem like that's naturally how an industry should emerge. And so, why did that even happen?
Well, because that's how the health industry wanted it to be, and the health industry has lobbied Congress over and over and over again to make sure.
Insurance companies wanted it to be.
Well, sorry, that's what I meant. The insurance companies. When I say the insurance companies, they lobby Congress to make sure there's very, very little regulation, and they can kind of do whatever they want. And this is all done in the name of free market capitalism, which I said again, works great for a lot of things, but not for everything else. Imagine, so we all have now.
I don't believe them when they say that, and that's probably part of the miscommunication. Is when somebody goes to Congress and asks for something in the name of the free market, I don't believe them what they're saying, because they're going to Congress. They're not going to the market.
Sure. Well, but sure, okay, yes, they're using government to line their pockets. Yeah. That's what they do. That's what every sort of interest group does. But look at TSA. TSA, in the last 20 years has become a product of it's become a normal thing in American life. And we look at those guys in the blue uniforms, and they're all government employees. And we look at it, and it gives us a certain amount of assurance. But imagine if, and that's one single system at every airport throughout the country, they're all trained the same way, they're all federal employees. But imagine if it wasn't. Imagine if every TSA system or every security system at the airports was done by a private third-party security system. So, in other words, that meant could be different rules for each airport. So some airports let you take on a razor, some didn't. Some airports might let you take on the small thing.
With the TSA.
Okay, but let's assume the TSA operated correctly.
The TSA I travel a lot, or I did before the pandemic. But traveling in and out of Atlanta is completely different than flying in and out of Phoenix. It's completely different than flying in and out of New York. I have not experienced consistency with the TSA, and even amongst the inconsistency, I have not experienced competency with the TSA. So
but no one is saying, and that this is where it'd be different from TSA. No one is saying that all of a sudden all the doctors would become less qualified or less credentialed, or they'd all become government employees. No one's saying that. Just that the health insurance plan would be a government plan. And by the way,
a funding mechanism, not a medical service mechanism.
Correct. Just the way the doctors get paid so that they can't turn anybody away and so that everybody can be served. I mean, imagine if we had that during this pandemic. We wouldn't have had a lot of the problems that we had.
So I guess the TSA gives some of the best massages out there, and you don't even need a table. You can be just standing there.
Well, if you have a name like me or you, yeah, it's a great massage. But, if you're a white guy, you don't get as much as those massages.
Right. I mean, it depends, though. Like, if you're a white guy wearing. With a coffee, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he turned Indian.
That's right.
I got an excellent massage at Orlando Airport once.
I'm sure you did.
That was beautiful. It was a big black dude. I don't see a relationship, though. But it was awesome. Anyway, so have you voted yet?
No, I'll be voting tomorrow at the polls.
Okay. And what was the rationale behind in-person versus absentee?
It wasn't about I always like to, I always like to watch the whole game. Let me put it like that. So, I want to watch the whole game and see what happens. And I've never voted. We have no excuse absentee voting in Michigan where you can vote early if you wanted to. And I just have never done that. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school, but I like to just go vote on election day at the poll. Right. Especially an election as volatile as this. I mean,
Right.
Trump
you want to watch the vote go in, right?
Partly is that, and partly is, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, only a month ago, Trump had COVID, who would have known what happened in the last couple weeks of the election? So, I mean,
and Trump is speaking like he's going to dispute mail-in ballots. Like, I was listening to a rally of him live today, and it honestly sounded like he was literally calling for voter fraud, because what he was saying was, in some of these states, they're not even required to count the mail-in ballots until after Tuesday. And so if you're going to vote by mail, you should still vote on Tuesday. And I'm like, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna challenge ballots, I imagine, based on signatures. So remember, everyone who is voting on a mail-in ballot or dropping it off somewhere or whatever is not having a poll worker look at their ID and run it through a system or whatever. And so that's where I think they're going to do the challenges, is going to be on comparing signatures, and which means there's going to be, remember in Florida when, in 2003 or 2000, when you saw those pictures of you had the pictures of the poll workers sitting there with like a Bush person and a Gore person on each side, and they were like looking at the ballot up in the thing, and you saw those pictures. This time it's going to be millions and millions and millions of signatures that they are going to be trying to challenge. And so it's going to be a much larger process, and I wouldn't be surprised if conservative courts say, just like they did in 2000, you know what, we're not going to have this. Throw out, just stop counting, which is what they did in 2000. And by the way, in 2000...
they're going to be disproportionately divided.
Yeah, and 2000
they were disproportionately concerned about COVID.
Yeah, and in 2000 there was no precedent for that, but now there is. Bush versus Gore is a precedent to shut down the counting. So it's going to be very interesting, and the Trump campaign has lawyers. I'm sure they already have the lawsuits written that are going to be filed Wednesday morning.
Right, yeah. Right. No, he says this is going to already poison ready. He's been talking about his strategy as a campaign rally talking point.
This is going to be a long, ugly process, and it's going to make. I think there's a very good possibility that it makes 2000 look like, it's a small world ride at Disneyland. It's not going to be pleasant, and it's going to take a long time. And remember, 2000 they didn't figure it out till the first week of December. And here, it could be even a bigger problem. And December 14th is the day that the electors meet. And if this stuff isn't figured out, you might have an electoral college convention where some states don't send their electors. And then it goes to Congress. And then in Congress, in the House of Representatives picks the president, but it's not each representative gets a vote. Each state delegation gets a vote, which means the 53 representatives from California have the same single vote as the one representative from Montana. Mm-hmm. And under that scenario, there's more Republicans. So it's going to be very, very interesting.
Right. Well, I heard that the number of mail-in votes or early voting in general already exceeded the in-person voting numbers of 2016 in some areas. So
Sure.
it's record-shattering numbers.
That makes sense to me. But and look, I mean, obviously, COVID is causing all of this, and it'll never be this high again, right?
Right.
As we learn to live with COVID and all this kind of stuff. But but I mean, but where is that happening? I mean, is it happening in California? Did out of that 90 million people that voted early, did 10 or 15 of them come from California? If it did, then it really doesn't make a difference on the electoral map, right? I do know that tomorrow in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Arizona, the polls won't be as full as they normally are, obviously, but they'll be very heavily Trump, at the polling places tomorrow.
Yeah,
and what's that going to
absolutely.
And what's that going to mean if they start releasing those? And by the way, most states, almost all states, are not allowed to start even counting the mail-ins and absentees until tomorrow. But that could be a long process. But the election day tallies, they'll have them right away. So what happens when they start reporting election day tallies without the absentees, and it looks like Trump wins, or at least he's ahead? And then
he's already said that he'll call it if it looks like he's clearly ahead. Like he's itching to announce as soon as possible. And even without the mail-in ballot fiasco, and even without the pandemic fiasco, it's just a fact of elections that early exit polls lean Republican and later exit polls lean Democrat, because Democrats disproportionately have to wait until they get off of work. and so it's gonna look like it always looks like Republicans are winning at first, and then you hope for that slide back to the middle.
I think there's a good chance it's going to be a circus.
This guy wants a circus. Trump wants a circus.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's in that confusion, it's in that fog of war that is his main strategy to steal the election. And it's like he's not even being secretive about it. It's like what he says his strategy is I'm going to sue to get the election.
Yeah, for sure.
So, not that it's enough talk about the election because there is so much, but I don't want to miss the chance to talk about you being a Palestinian.
I am a Palestinian, that's correct.
And being a Palestinian makes you smile for some reason. Why is that?
It does. Well, I mean, look, we've had a tough life, and I wrote a book called Being Palestinian Makes Me Smile because a lot of people think that we're not happy and we're not joyful, but we are. And maybe we're overly happy and joyful as a result of all the stuff we've been through for 72 years. And there's a lot of days where, look, I don't think any Palestinian wakes up, especially when you watch the news and you watch all the stuff that happens to us all the time. No Palestinian wakes up and says, hey, I think this is going to be a great day. Nobody does that. We got to kind of purposely and intentionally be joyful and happy and resilient and hopeful. And we've done a really good job at that over the years. So yes, I am very happy. I never say that I'm proud to be Palestinian because you should be proud of stuff that you achieved. This just happened to me, that I'm Palestinian. But I'm very happy that it ended up this way because we do have a beautiful resilience and a beautiful happiness and generosity about us, which I think is true with all Arabs, but Palestinians especially, is we have this thing that just keeps us ticking all the time, and that is something that I always want to celebrate.
And you don't take many vacations. You don't go away much. What's up with that?
Well, I always say Palestinians, we don't go on vacation because we don't like to leave our house for more than 2 or 3 days because we remember what happened last time we did that. It didn't turn out very well.
And also, surprisingly, not surprisingly, but many Palestinians are very successful businessmen or professionals. Like the excellence in achievements is high in the Palestinian community. What do you attribute that to?
Well, we don't have Plan B. We can't fail and go back to our country. It doesn't work like that for us. So we have to make it work wherever we can. I mean, it's like I told a joke in 2016 where I said I ran into a Trump supporter and he told me to go back to your country. And I said, well, I'm Palestinian. We've been trying to go back to our country for 72 years, and they're not letting us. So I mean, it is something different, right? That refugee mindset of having to make it work wherever you are, which leads to, overeducation, overachievement, which is I guess a perk of exile. By the way, not that different from the way Jewish communities have acted throughout the centuries, right? They've always felt like they were a diaspora, and Palestinians feel the same way. And Edward Said, our great Palestinian intellectual, once labeled us Palestinians as the victims of the victims. So all this kind of stuff is very, very familiar to us.
So, any last thoughts? Like, what do you want to see after tomorrow? Direct your message to those who are voting for the ham sandwich.
Yeah.
What they need to do.
Well,
tomorrow.
First of all, vote and go vote. And let's make sure that we have big numbers, especially for the Arab and Muslim communities out there, so we can show that we have those numbers. But to understand that no matter what happens, our fight as Arab Americans and as Muslim Americans continues. If it's Trump, it continues in the way that it's been going on. If it's Biden, it continues in a different way, which is going to be the very difficult job of holding him accountable to the promises that he made us, the very few promises, frankly, that he's made us, and then holding him to make real change when it comes to foreign policy, like the Palestinian question. I mean, he's the only presidential candidate that I've ever heard of that actually called himself a Zionist. So, we have to hold him to doing the right. Oh yeah, he called himself a Zionist in an interview in 2007. We have to be holding him accountable to have a better policy when it comes to Yemen, because he's been a little wishy-washy about that. Having a better policy when it comes to interventionism. I mean, say what you want about Trump, he's kind of like a non-interventionist in the Arab world. And Biden comes from that school of thought that supported the interventionist policy in Libya, which turned out to be a disaster for us. Supported some interventionist policies in Syria, which I don't think turned out well for us either. Supports blindly funding Israel, supports these alliances with Saudi Arabia. He's been part of that foreign policy establishment for a very, very long time. So he is not at the best, he's just a better opponent in the White House. As long as we view it in that way, and we understand that he's still a ham sandwich, and the prohibition still goes into effect the day the elections end, then maybe we'll get something out of it. I'm afraid that there's too many people in our communities who are going to think that this is some sort of big victory, who are going to participate in all the parades, and who are going to do their best to get invited to a White House iftar and take a picture with Biden and think everything's okay. And everything is not going to be okay. So we just have to be very, very aware of that.
And I like very much what you said, that we might need to oppose and organize against him as much as we're doing against Trump.
Yes.
So this is very important to keep in mind, that it's a necessity move for those Muslims and Arabs voting in swing states. If your preference is that you think Biden is better than Trump, then this is the move for you. That's permissible to vote for the ham sandwich.
That's right.
But there is no famine, and ham is still forbidden in New York and in California.
Right. That's right. And still forbidden everywhere else on November 4th. I mean, on November 4th, it goes back to being forbidden everywhere else. And by the way, while we're talking about ham and pigs for a second, to all, if there's any of those white nationalist racists out there who are watching this, who sometimes come to Arab festivals, they've done it in Dearborn before, and they come to our festivals and they try to offend us by holding a pig's head on a stick. Let me just say to all the stupid racists out there, that's not offensive. Okay, we're not offended by you desecrating a pig. Okay, we don't worship pigs. We don't eat them. It's not, but they come to our things and they hold up pigs' heads, and they think that's gonna piss off the Muslims, and no one's mad when you hold up. Yeah, I mean, we don't like it. If you want to desecrate the head of a pig, go ahead. We don't care. If you really want to piss off Arabs at
It offends
a
me as an artist. That's what it does.
yeah. If you really want to piss off Arabs at an Arab festival, start desecrating things we really care about, like bottles of cologne, or like really expensive shoes, or cost. Yeah, start talking bad about Costco, or like bring out like
Pasta?
Costco, or like bring out like a Mercedes S Class and start destroying it. Then you will see our rage come out. But holding up a pig's head is not really offensive to it. Just a little note to the racists out there: we don't really care about pigs. We just don't eat them.
Right. I completely agree. So this has been really fun. I appreciate you so much coming in and explaining your academic fatwa. And I want to leave the floor open for you if you want to.
Oh man, the hour's up. That flew by.
Yeah, the hour's up.
Time flew and like it was amazing.
Well, the only last thing I want to say is that I want to say thank you to you for doing these things for our community and all the work that you do, and not enough people know about the great things that you do for our community and making sure that our voices are always heard. So thank you, Hisham.
No, thank you, Amer. Appreciate it. And I hope that people take your advice and stop eating ham on November 4th.
That's right. All right, guys, have a good night.
Thank you so much, Amer. Take care.
All right. Bye. Alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. So this was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
Very kind of him to take the time and come and explain his theory. And I'm glad. And here's the thing: when I posted the flyer of this show, this particular episode, and I kind of made it like a joke, like he's going to say, based on his Islamic teaching and stuff like that, that is permissible to, and come and see it. In a few places where I posted this on Facebook, I got some flack.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not traditionally educated. He shouldn't be talking about this. And some other guy from Australia came on and started cursing, and like it was
he's a comedian. He's qualified to tell a joke.
Right. Like people need to chill a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
But
I thought it was interesting what he said about the refugee mentality being similar to like the centuries of the Jewish mentality as a people in diaspora, right?
Yeah.
And it occurred to me too that that's very similar to the tendency I've seen of Palestinians to be comedians.
Right.
And
right,
I wonder
right.
if that is a similar, I don't know, psychological or cultural, onus that has produced so many comedians in the Jewish community. You know what I mean? Like if humor is a coping mechanism to tragedy, it makes sense. That,
Definitely. I've heard or read that somewhere, that like when you face a lot of calamities and you wisely like deal with it, it could turn you into a comedian. So yeah. I've seen that in many people. But yeah, alhamdulillah. So I'll see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. We're on from 8 until California closes, or I fall down asleep in front of the camera. But this will be open mic. Anybody watching can come in studio right here with us and ask a question or make a comment. Or you can just post your comments and questions on Facebook and YouTube. So I guess with this we'll end. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of tonight's episode of Vantage Points. There are hashtags and there is a hashtag. Take care, America. Good night, Davi. Assalamu alaikum.
Good night. Wa alaikum salam.